Tonight, we're going to gently explore one of the less glamorous, often heartbreaking corners of that ancient world. What life was truly like for a male concubine in ancient Greece. It's a reality far removed from the idealized images of philosophers and warriors, a side of daily life that often gets overlooked in the scrolls of history. You might encounter an old man arguing passionately about ethics, totally oblivious to the silent, watchful young figure at his side, who, by the end of our journey tonight, you'll understand far better. You probably won't survive a day here with your modern sensibilities intact, let alone in the shoes of someone so vulnerable. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening, let me know where in the world you are and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself observing the complex social hierarchy where citizenship is paramount and freedom is a prized possession. The air hums with intellectual curiosity, but also with unspoken rules and power dynamics. It's a key historical understanding that while grand philosophical ideas blossomed, so did practices that seem utterly foreign and even disturbing to us today. You might notice, for instance, a wealthy Athenian citizen strolling through the market, perhaps with a younger, exceptionally beautiful man accompanying him, not as an equal, but with a subtle difference that hints at their unequal standing. This isn't a typical master-slave dynamic, nor is it a publicly acknowledged partnership. It exists in a peculiar, ill-defined space. A curious detail you might miss at first glance is the way these relationships were often seen as a status symbol, a quiet display of wealth and influence for the patron, much like owning a fine piece of art or a well-bred horse. Historians still argue whether the subtle power plays in these relationships were ever truly reciprocal, or if the veneer of mentorship merely masked a deeper form of exploitation. You're beginning to see that the celebrated ideals of ancient Greece sometimes had a darker, more complex underbelly. As you wander through the winding streets, the sounds of daily life wash over you. The rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the distant bleating of goats, the chatter of women at the public fountain. Imagine for a moment the contrast between the grand philosophical discourses you might overhear and the quiet, almost invisible struggles unfolding behind the walls of private homes. You might catch a glimpse of a young man dressed simply, carrying a basket of goods into a large, imposing villa. His eyes seem to hold a story, a subtle weariness that belies his youth. This isn't the romanticized image of ancient Greece you often see on pottery or in plays. This is a place where social roles are rigidly defined, and opportunities are scarce for those outside the privileged few. The concept of freedom here is not universal. It's a carefully guarded privilege, often dependent on birthright, wealth, or specific legal statuses. Consider the notion of love and desire in this ancient setting. While poetry and myth celebrated passionate romances, the reality for many was far more transactional. You might ponder how different their understanding of relationships was, lacking the modern emphasis on mutual consent and emotional equality. The very air seems to hum with unspoken expectations and hidden arrangements. It's a society built on a delicate balance of honor, reputation, and strict social codes. You'll soon discover that what was considered acceptable behind closed doors could be vastly different from what was openly acknowledged in the public square. The sun begins to dip lower, casting long shadows across the ancient stones, and you feel the weight of this historical reality settling in. The gentle hum of the evening cicadas provides a calming backdrop. Even as the gravity of the subject begins to unfold, you might also notice the sheer density of life. Every alleyway seems to bustle with activity. Children chase each other, their laughter echoing off stone walls. Vendors hawk their wares, their voices a melodic drone. The scents are myriad: sweet figs, pungent olives, the earthy aroma of freshly baked bread. Even amidst this vibrant tapestry, your focus is drawn to the more subtle cues of status and power. The way some people walk with an air of unquestioned authority, their heads held high, their gaze direct, contrasting sharply with those who move with a more deferential posture, their eyes downcast. You observe the easy camaraderie among groups of men who appear to be peers, their discussions animated, and their gestures uninhibited. Then your gaze might fall upon another young figure, perhaps standing quietly near a shop entrance, his demeanour echoing your own subtle unease. These are the individuals who exist on the fringes, not quite part of the recognised social order, yet inextricably linked to it. The city hums with life, but for some that hum is a constant reminder of their place, a quiet whisper of their limited world. As the sun begins its slow ascent over the ancient city, painting the marble with hues of rose and gold, your journey truly begins. You're not merely an observer now, you're experiencing, through the lens of history, what it meant to be a male concubine in this world. This position, you quickly realise, was not about mutual affection or a recognised partnership in the way we understand relationships today. Instead, it was deeply rooted in the social stratification of ancient Greece, a society obsessed with status, citizenship, and freedom. It's a key historical understanding that while citizens enjoyed a certain level of autonomy, many others were not so fortunate. Slaves, of course, occupied the lowest rung, considered property rather than people. But male concubines existed in a murky, often contradictory space, somewhere above outright slavery, yet far, far below the esteemed status of a free man. A curious detail about this era is that while the concept of paiderastia existed, a mentorship relationship between an older man, the erastes, and a younger boy, the eromenos, that sometimes included sexual intimacy. It was often idealized in philosophical texts as a means of education and character development. However, the reality of male concubinage, as you're experiencing it, rarely lived up to that lofty ideal. These were not typically relationships of intellectual equals or revered mentorship. Instead, concubines were primarily kept for sexual gratification and as symbols of their patron's wealth and power. Historians still argue whether any true affection or genuine care could flourish within such an inherently unequal power dynamic, or if the concubine's emotional well-being was simply an afterthought. You might feel a flicker of cynicism observing the hypocrisy. You might find yourself wondering about the legal standing of such individuals. Were they slaves? Were they free? The answer is frustratingly fluid and depended heavily on individual circumstances. Most male concubines were either slaves specifically acquired for this purpose, or free-born but impoverished young men sold or forced into the role due to desperate economic circumstances. For a slave concubine, your body and your time belonged entirely to your owner. You had no rights, no recourse, and no hope of legal protection. For a free-born male forced into concubinage, the situation was marginally different, perhaps allowing for a theoretical, though rarely actionable, claim to freedom. However, the pervasive economic dependence and social stigma meant that even a freeborn concubine lived a life of profound vulnerability. Imagine for a moment the psychological toll. You are an object, valued for your youth and beauty, perhaps for your ability to entertain, but rarely for your mind or your spirit. Your days are dictated by the whims of your patron. You might be summoned at any hour, day or night, to attend to his needs. This could involve serving him food and drink, providing musical entertainment, or simply being present for his sexual gratification. There's a constant pressure to anticipate his desires, to maintain a calm and agreeable demeanour, regardless of your internal turmoil. You learn to read the subtle shifts in his mood, the slight tightening of his jaw, the glint in his eye, all clues to what he expects of you next. Your survival, in a very real sense, depends on your ability to remain pliable and obedient. The air might be thick with the aroma of roasted meats and fine wine, but for you, it's just another evening of performance and submission. There's a quiet dread that permeates your existence, a constant awareness of your precarious position. You walk a fine line, needing to please your patron to ensure your continued, albeit miserable, existence, while simultaneously enduring the indignities that come with the role. The gentle evening breeze might bring a temporary respite from the heat, but it does little to alleviate the internal chill of your reality. You become an expert in the art of quiet observation. You notice the subtle interactions between family members, the unspoken commands between master and slave, the casual assumptions of superiority from citizens. You learn to interpret the silences, the glances, the slight shifts in posture that signal approval or displeasure. This skill is born not of curiosity but of necessity. Your very well-being depends on your ability to accurately gauge the moods of those around you, particularly your patron. You might spend hours in a single room, a silent witness to debates on democracy or discussions about military campaigns, absorbing fragments of knowledge you are not meant to wield. The sounds of distant laughter from the street, perhaps from free men enjoying a stroll, highlight the boundary of your existence. You are inside, always watching, always serving, a silent part of the opulent machinery, yet fundamentally disconnected from the free will and agency that powers it. The shadows lengthen, bringing with them a sense of quiet resignation, a familiar companion in your constrained life. The morning sun now fully illuminates the city, highlighting the stark contrast within its seemingly idyllic facade. You've settled into the rhythm of this peculiar existence, and one thing becomes glaringly clear. Your status, or rather your lack thereof, defines every waking moment. The phrase male concubine might sound exotic to modern ears, but in ancient Greece for many it simply translated to catamite, a term often applied to young boys and men who served as passive sexual partners. These individuals were frequently acquired through various means. Some were war captives, others were children sold by impoverished families, and a few, though likely rare for those truly enslaved, might have been free-born individuals driven by destitution. This complex origin story for such individuals means that their starting point in this unenviable role could vary, yet the ultimate outcome was remarkably similar in its limitations and hardships. A curious detail about the term catamite is its linguistic origin, deriving from the Latin catamitus, which itself was a Romanization of the Greek name Ganymede. Remember Ganymede from the myths, the beautiful Trojan prince abducted by Zeus to be his cupbearer on Olympus. While the myth might sound romantic, often depicting an almost idyllic servitude, the reality for human catamites was anything but divine. They were far from revered. Historians still argue whether the use of such a mythical, almost divine association served to soften the harsh reality of their exploitation, or simply highlighted the absolute power dynamic at play, implying a natural order to their submission. You can almost feel the uncomfortable irony of it all, a beautiful name masking a painful truth. Your early life, if you were to embody this role, would likely have been one marked by profound loss and a sudden, brutal transition. Perhaps you remember the warmth of a simple home, the laughter of siblings, or the comforting scent of your mother's cooking. All of that is gone now, replaced by the sterile opulence, or sometimes the stark utility, of your patron's household. You were, in essence, chosen, not chosen for your intellect or your bravery, but for your youth, your appearance, and your perceived pliancy. This selection was rarely, if ever, a matter of consent. It was a transaction, a capture, or a desperate surrender. Imagine the crushing weight of that realization, your very being, your future, dictated by someone else's desires, with no say in the matter, no appeal, and no escape. You're meticulously taught specific behaviors that define your new existence. How to serve with quiet efficiency. How to please without overt displays of emotion. How to be silent and unobtrusive when not explicitly called upon. Your movements become economical, almost graceful in their learned deference. Your expressions muted, a careful mask. You learn to anticipate needs before they are even voiced, a skill born of constant observation and the urgent need to avoid displeasure. There's a quiet desperation that permeates your learned compliance, an unspoken plea for peaceful existence within your confines. The opulent frescoes on the walls depicting gods and heroes in triumphs and romantic dances seem to mock your predicament, their idealized narratives contrasting sharply with your diminished reality. They tell tales of mighty deeds and great freedoms, while your own story is one of quiet subjugation, a life lived entirely on another's terms. You might even observe other household slaves, perhaps performing more strenuous tasks like grinding grain or hauling water, and wonder if their lot, despite its physical harshness, somehow offers more dignity than your own. At least their labour, however arduous, has a tangible, recognised purpose in the household's function, beyond simply existing for another's gratification. Their daily grind, while gruelling, might feel less personally violating. The gentle rustle of olive leaves outside the window offers a fleeting moment of peace, quickly overshadowed by the ever-present awareness of your situation. A constant hum of powerlessness beneath the surface of daily life, as you continue your silent existence within the labyrinthine corridors of your patron's estate. You become acutely aware of the intricate web of power that defines your every interaction. Your patron, typically an older aristocratic man, holds absolute sway over your life. He is your Erastes, the older dominant partner in this arrangement, and you are his Eromenos, the younger passive one. It was generally understood that these relationships, while often sexual, were framed in philosophical discourse as opportunities for the older man to impart wisdom and knowledge to the younger. However, the reality for a male concubine often fell far short of this idealized model. Instead of intellectual cultivation, your purpose was primarily one of service and gratification. A curious detail is that while Greek society openly acknowledged many forms of same-sex relationships, particularly the pedagogical ones, those involving concubines were often spoken of in hushed tones or veiled in euphemisms. This was unlike the more celebrated, often public, mentor-mentee pairings between free citizens, which were seen as contributing to the civic good. This subtle distinction highlights the underlying social discomfort with the concubine's status, a kind of collective turning away from its less savoury aspects. Historians still argue whether the philosophical justifications for paiderastia were genuinely believed by all, or if they sometimes served as a convenient intellectual veneer for more exploitative practices, allowing the elite to rationalize their desires. You might feel a flicker of cynicism, observing this hypocrisy from your silent vantage point. Your days are structured around your patron's whims. You might be summoned at any hour, day or night, to attend to his needs, which could range from the mundane to the deeply intimate. This could involve serving him food and drink, providing musical entertainment, or simply being present for his sexual gratification. There's a constant, pervasive pressure to anticipate his desires, to maintain a calm and agreeable demeanour, regardless of your internal turmoil. You learn to read the subtle shifts in his mood, the slight tightening of his jaw, the almost imperceptible glint in his eye, the change in the tone of his voice. All these are crucial clues to what he expects of you next, and your immediate compliance is paramount. Your survival, in a very real sense, depends on your ability to remain pliable and obedient, a constant performance of submission. Imagine for a moment the emotional suppression required for this existence. You cannot express fear, anger, or sadness, at least not openly. Any uncalculated display of genuine emotion might be perceived as defiance, leading to swift and unpleasant consequences. Your true self, your hopes, your dreams, your cherished memories of a life before this servitude, must be carefully tucked away, hidden deep within. They are a secret garden no one else can visit. The luxurious fabrics around you, the rich scents of incense and perfume that fill the villa, are merely a gilded cage. You might be given fine clothing, perhaps even some small trinkets, but these are tokens of your servitude, not symbols of your freedom. They are a display for your patron's friends, a testament to his wealth, not a comfort for your soul. You are, in essence, a living ornament, a beautiful object, a testament to his power and his desires. The distant sounds of a flute played by some free citizen in a nearby courtyard remind you of a different kind of life, one filled with unburdened melody and spontaneous joy, a stark contrast to the silent symphony of your own constrained existence. The very air around you feels heavy with unspoken expectations, a constant pressure that never truly lifts. The hours within your patron's home stretch out, filled with a quiet routine dictated by his needs. You begin to understand that while a surface level of mentorship might be paid lip service by your patron, the practical application of it is often absent. You'll find that true educational guidance, encompassing intellectual and moral development, was typically reserved for young, freeborn males, often within the context of the gymnasium or philosophical schools. Your own education, if any, would be limited to practical skills or rudimentary literacy, just enough to fulfill your duties, but certainly not to elevate your social standing or grant you any form of independent thought. You are a tool, and tools need only enough knowledge to perform their function. A curious detail is that sometimes concubines were expected to possess certain artistic talents, like playing a musical instrument, singing, or reciting poetry. Imagine mastering the lyre not for the pure joy of music or for self-expression, but purely as another means to entertain your patron and his guests, to become another pleasing sound in the background of their lavish symposia. Your performances are not applauded for your artistry, but for how well they serve to enhance the atmosphere for the free men present. Historians still argue whether these acquired skills offered any real personal enrichment, or merely served to enhance the concubine's market value or appeal to their patron, making them a more desirable possession. You might feel a dull ache in your fingers from practicing, not from passion, but from the relentless grip of obligation. Your daily routine often involves a strange mix of idleness and sudden demands. You might spend long stretches waiting, an invisible presence in the household, observing the comings and goings of slaves, family members, and visitors. You become a master of patience, existing in a state of suspended animation. Then, without warning, you're called upon. Perhaps your patron desires a massage, or wants you to recline beside him while he reads aloud, or expects you to join him in his private chambers. There is no predictability, no personal schedule you can truly call your own. Your body and your time are not yours. They are extensions of your patron's will, subject to his instantaneous desires like a puppet responding to its master's unseen strings. You eat what you are given, sleep where you are told, and wear what is provided. Even the simplest pleasures, like a moment of quiet reflection in a shaded courtyard or a brief walk in the garden, are contingent on your patron's mood and his explicit permission. The grand architecture around you, the intricate mosaics underfoot, the sunlight filtering through the peristyle columns, all serve as a beautiful but constant reminder of your confinement. You are part of the scenery, a living, breathing decoration in this elaborate domestic theatre. The sounds of distant laughter from the street, perhaps from free children playing, might drift in, a poignant reminder of the simple, unburdened freedom you've lost. You learn to make your face a mask, your movements precise and silent, becoming an expert in disappearing into the shadows, emerging only when commanded. It's a quiet, relentless erasure of your own self, a slow fading into the background of another's life. The sun continues its slow arc across the Athenian sky, and as the day wears on, you become acutely aware of the pervasive social stigma that clings to your very existence. While the practice of male concubinage was, in some ways, an open secret among the elite, it was never a path to social honour or public acclaim. Quite the opposite. You'd feel the subtle, yet unmistakable weight of disapproval from those considered respectable members of society. It's a key historical point that even in a society where same-sex relationships were not inherently taboo, the passive role in such a relationship for a free man was often seen as effeminate and thus a profound mark of shame. This societal condemnation, more than any legal code, acted as an invisible cage, preventing any hope of genuine integration or respect. A curious detail you might observe is how even within the patron's household, the other, more traditionally enslaved individuals might view you with a mixture of pity and a nuanced form of contempt. They at least perform recognized labor, whether in the fields, the workshops, or the kitchens. Their work, though arduous, had a defined purpose within the household economy. Your work, however, is intimate and often humiliating, reducing you to an object of pleasure, a personal indulgence that carries less societal validation. Historians still argue whether the deep-seated societal aversion to the passive male role contributed more to the concubine's misery than the actual legal limitations they faced, creating an internal and external landscape of disdain. You can feel the quiet judgment in every averted gaze, every dismissive glance, a constant whisper of your diminished standing. You are acutely aware that your relationship with your patron is not, and can never be, publicly acknowledged in any honourable way. You wouldn't be introduced as a partner in a civic setting, nor would your presence ever be celebrated in a formal gathering of free citizens. Instead, you exist in the shadows, a hidden, often unspoken element of your patron's private life. If he entertains, you might be present to serve, to provide background entertainment, but never to sit as an equal or engage in intellectual discourse. You are a commodity, an extension of his private desires, rather than a person with inherent worth or recognized social identity. This distinction is paramount, always placing you outside the circle of valued individuals. Imagine the constant self-awareness of this low status. Every time you step outside the confines of the house, perhaps on an errand for your patron, you move with a subtle hunch, a guardedness in your eyes, a conscious effort to blend into the background. You learn to make yourself small, invisible to the casual passerby, lest their recognition bring further shame not only to you, but potentially to your patron. If he were to be associated too openly with such a stigmatized figure, the beautiful Greek sculptures you might glimpse in public spaces celebrating the idealized male form in athletic and heroic poses serve as a cruel contrast to your own diminished reality. You are not a warrior, not a philosopher, not a citizen. You are simply his. This constant sense of being less than is an insidious poison, slowly eroding any sense of self-worth you might once have possessed, leaving behind a hollow echo of your former self. The bustling sounds of the city, once a source of wonder, now seem to amplify your isolation, a loud reminder of the vibrant life from which you are fundamentally excluded. As your days unfold, the lack of any formal legal status becomes a suffocating reality. You are effectively without rights in a society that prides itself on its laws and civic structures. It's a cruel twist of fate that while ancient Greek law could be incredibly detailed and sophisticated, offering protections to citizens, and even to a limited extent to some categories of slaves with specific roles, it offered almost none for a male concubine. If your patron chose to mistreat you or even to inflict severe harm, you had virtually no recourse, no avenue for justice, and no hope of legal redress. Your existence was, in a legal sense, a blank page. A curious detail you might discover is that while harming a free person could carry severe penalties, sometimes even death in certain city-states, the same rules simply did not apply to you. Your body was not legally considered inviolable in the same way. You were not seen as a person in the legal sense that mattered for such protections, but rather as property, or, at best, an appendage of your patron. Historians still argue whether this legal void was an oversight, a deliberate omission designed to maintain the absolute power of the patron and to prevent any challenge to the social order, or a simple reflection of a society that couldn't quite categorize you. You feel the cold dread of this reality, a constant awareness that your physical well-being is entirely at the mercy of another's whim. There's no one to appeal to, no magistrate to petition, no family to offer protection, for you are likely cut off from your own. Imagine a scenario where your patron, perhaps in a fit of pique or drunken rage during a symposium, strikes you. You might instinctively flinch, but you know better than to resist, or even cry out too loudly. A bruised eye, a cut lip, or a broken tooth is simply something you endure, perhaps hiding it as best you can from others in the household, lest it displease your patron further. There would be no consequences for your patron, no legal repercussions, no public outcry. Your body, in essence, is not your own. It is an extension of his will, a plaything to be used and discarded as he sees fit. This absolute lack of legal recourse means you live in a constant state of apprehension, a perpetual fear of the unexpected. Every interaction with your patron, no matter how benign, carries an unspoken threat, a chilling reminder of his power and your utter helplessness. Even the smallest gestures of kindness from your patron, if they occur, serve only to highlight your dependence. A new tunic, a slightly larger portion of food during a meal, a moment of seemingly unguarded conversation. These aren't gestures of equality or genuine affection, but rather subtle reminders of who holds the strings. You are acutely aware that these meagre comforts can be withdrawn at any moment, leaving you with absolutely nothing. Your perceived good fortune is merely a reflection of his momentary mood or a calculation of his own convenience. The world outside the patron's villa might seem vibrant and alive with the sounds of commerce and the roar of public debate, but for you, those sounds are just distant echoes of a freedom you do not possess, a life lived by rules that do not apply to you. The soft glow of oil lamps begins to cast long, dancing shadows on the walls of your small quarters, and you find yourself wishing for the quiet oblivion of sleep, a brief escape from the day's anxieties and the ever-present threat of your vulnerable reality. As your days in this ancient Greek household unfold, the stark reality of your economic dependence becomes an undeniable heavy burden. You possess nothing of your own. No land to cultivate, no trade to practice, no specialized skills that could genuinely earn you an independent living outside of your patron's household. Your very sustenance, your clothing, your shelter, all come directly from his generosity, or rather his calculation of your utility. It's a foundational aspect of this historical period that economic autonomy was intrinsically linked to social freedom. Without the means to support yourself, you were inevitably beholden to another, utterly reliant on their continued provision. This dependency created a cage, invisible yet unbreakable, where your survival was dictated by a single will. A curious detail you might reflect on is how this reliance creates a peculiar kind of psychological trap, an invisible bond even stronger than physical chains. Even if your patron is not overtly cruel, the constant awareness that your well-being hinges entirely on his whim is debilitating. You are like a plant that can only grow with the precise amount of water and sunlight provided by its gardener. Too little, and you wither. Too much, and you drown in obligation. Historians still argue whether the economic leverage held by patrons was a more effective tool of control than outright physical coercion, subtly crushing the spirit without leaving visible marks, creating a deeper, more insidious form of servitude. You feel this silent, insidious pressure every moment, a constant gnawing at your sense of self-worth. Imagine the absolute lack of agency that defines your existence. If you dreamed of a different life, of learning a craft or travelling to another city to seek your fortune, those dreams would quickly evaporate under the crushing weight of your circumstances. You cannot simply walk away. Where would you go? Who would take you in? Without financial means, without connections, without a recognized place in society, you would quickly face starvation, exposure, or be forced into an even more desperate and dangerous form of servitude, perhaps in a brothel, or as a common labourer with no protections whatsoever. This complete reliance binds you to your patron as surely as any physical chain. You are an asset, a possession that requires upkeep, a means to an end, but a possession nonetheless. Lacking self-ownership, even the food you eat, though it might be plentiful and of good quality if your patron is wealthy and desires to keep his property well maintained, comes with a silent price. Each morsel is a constant, humbling reminder of your dependency, a visible symbol of your lack of independence. The quiet clatter of dishes from the kitchen, the distant hum of daily life in the household, all serve to underscore your unique and isolated position within it. You are cared for, yes. Your basic needs are met, but not out of love or genuine respect, but out of ownership and utility. This economic tether ensnares you, body and soul, in a reality from which escape seems utterly impossible.